But yeah.
I think we need to come back for the second part. The impact. I have the recording. After giving half the room a personal invitation to continue with the program. And in celebration of 15 years of CMIR. So we've got a dense video panel for this afternoon session, so we're very forward to get with it. I have just for the people in the room and those online, I have turned on the recording again, so this session too is being recorded. I'm super happy that these wonderful 6 speakers have accepted our invitation to join us here today. So we have next to me, we've got Jacqueline Winstanley. She's the founder and CEO of Universal Inclusion and the Inclusive Entrepreneur. And you're also leading on the all-party parliamentary group for inclusive entrepreneurship. Something very, very topical, and we've heard a lot about this already at the first panel. Next to Jacqueline, we've got Dr. John Potter. He is from the OECD, head of the Entrepreneurship Policy and Analysis Unit at the Centre for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities. And next to John, we have Felipe Martin Gomez. He's the VP of Fintech Venture Studios and Barclays, also affiliated with Barclays Bank. Right. Sitting next to Felipe is Dr. Nicola Searle. She is senior lecturer at Goldsmiths University, right? And she's also a long-standing collaborator with Federica from the CIMR and Pluto. We've heard about their joint work already in the first session. And then we've got Saverio Romeo. He's got also very long-standing collaboration with the CIMR. He's also founder of Emerging Technology Observatory, but he's also involved in teaching capacities and activities here at Birkbeck. And then sitting at the end, but not last but not least, we've got Dr. Rosa Fernandez, and Rosa is now working for Horizon Europe Analysis with the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. We're very grateful that the speakers have accepted the invitation. And what we have done is we've shared these 6 We've shared 6 potential questions with them to address in a short and sharp way. Choose up to 2 of those questions, and their choices up here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do something very similar to the first panel, and I go through each of these questions. So not everybody will be speaking to those questions at a time. So starting with the first question here on the slide behind you. This is where the panel is going to turn their heads to actually hide them, to remind them. So the first question is, how can policy and practice support the responsible development and use of emerging technologies, including AI? And maybe I'll start first. Can I say ladies first? Rosa, would you be happy to start?
Thank you, Marion. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to be here. I've also been, although Marion is a long-standing collaboration of the CMIR different disguises, so very pleased to be here. And very pleased to be looking at this question, there was a lot of discussion about AI and the types of AI in the previous panel. It is a very timely topic for, I guess, everyone who is teaching. You know, I'm not teaching, I'm a policy advisor, you know, analysis in particular. And I think the first thing I would say is that you know, emerging technologies, and particularly AI, is not a policy that you know you do to benefit, you do with them. You know, they only have value unless they are being used by them. So as such, it is not a policy that you know, like funding policy is something that you have to do, like co-creation, as Monica said, in collaboration with them. To me, particularly with AI and specifically large language models, which is most of the ones I know most people refer to these days when we talk about AI, you know, it's a distinction between whether you use them in the personal realm or in the professional realm. And the example I tend to use here is like, you know, there's a lot of, you know, animosity about these AIs and what they can do or cannot do. And I think of knives, like, you know, of course, like, you know, knives are very useful, but they are also used, you know, for bad things. And so in the same way, you know, we should not discount a particular new technology because sometimes it is being used, you know, for the wrong purposes. So to me, AI tools are a bit like, you know, those tools that can be used for different purposes, some of which are more productive than others. Talking about the question, which is asking what can we do? So if I carry on with the example of knives, you know, there are ways in which you can regulate, first of all, the access to them, you know, who do you sell them to? So access to AI tools, if we think they can be used for the wrong purposes and therefore we have a negative impact, like killing someone with a knife. So you regulate, you know, who have access to them to the extent that you can. As Tim Borley said earlier, these days it's very difficult to regulate access to large language models. And therefore, you know, you can also then make the person who is using these tools responsible. As we do with knives, if you use it with eating, you know, that's fine. If you use it to kill someone, you end up in jail. And therefore, you know, giving responsibility to the people, you know, who are using these technologies to the users is for me one of the ways in which we can think about allowing them to be used for the right purposes. And then the one thing you need for people to be responsible, again, part of the question is education. Something again very much linked to the previous session, which I thought was very refreshing to hear about, you know, the embrace, you know, so educators embracing the fact that AI and particularly LLMs are out there for people to use. Therefore, let's not try and run away from them, but embed them in the everyday activities we have with them. And I'll finish with something because a lot of people will say, oh, here we have a policy advisor talking about LLMs. I have found them useful in my line of work, you know, particularly for doing something that has very much to do with innovation, something that was also mentioned before. In my line of work, I have found that if you like, you know, codify data, once you start adding code, as well as new papers, as well as new things, the amount of things has become exponentially increasing. There used to be a time in my line of work with doing a little bit of a search and talking to some academics, I could get a good idea of what was going on in the world of X. These days is no longer possible. So in my line of work, we use LLMs to try and get summaries of what's going on, some of which we might be aware, some of which we might not be aware. And this is one of the areas where I think the AI that we use, like LLMs, can help us make the most of innovation by surfacing things that I wouldn't get access unless I have these crawlers going around the world looking for stuff for me. That's me. Thank you, Mark.
Rosa. Nicola, will you go next? No, I don't want to jump so very back. I know you've got a question after, and I know maybe your answer wants to connect both. So, Nicola?
Like looking at it on a market level is when I saw this question is what I immediately thought of. And it's partially a slightly cynical take in some ways, unfortunately, but where the regulation should come in. So one of the things that we see in new technologies is, you know, first mover advantages, things like that. And I think we're going to see this more so in AI because it feeds itself. So once you have an AI, you start to accumulate more data, your AI gets better, etc. So I think we're going to see a few companies ending up with very strong control over the market. And so we'll have an oligopoly situation, and that has, just from a competition perspective, it has implications. That is also likely to spill over or rather be underpinned by the area that I like, which is intellectual property. So there's really big fights going on in terms of some of the software and hardware associated with these things. A lot of the patenting side is much more on the hardware, but you can see that the power positions are going to be entrenched over the coming years. We've already got the forerunners. And this is, that's not something new. We have that in other markets. But I think that this particular technology lends itself to the kind of accumulation of data capital. That kind of, the ability for these companies to get bigger and bigger and dominate the market it's there. I mean, the technology does that. So that's one thing, and the policy there which is why I say the slightly cynical take is because how do we restrain that? Because of course, if we have a market dominated by a few companies, then it's going to crowd out other innovations, smaller players. And so there's a role there, whether or not that actually manifests itself, because different jurisdictions having different vibes in terms of how willing we are to actually investigate and do things about anti-competitive behaviors is not consistent across the world, whereas the global nature of these technologies is. So we'll see what we end up with there. That's a little bit, because as Saverio said, money talks, right? That's not quite what you said. I'm mispurposing it. But anyway, I put it in the AI and that's what it told me. So that's one thing that I'm a little bit concerned about, but there is a policy role there. There's some things in terms of patents that also might attenuate some of those things. The other part, and Rosa was talking about this too, is the harms created by this. So we have the online harms, we have the harms in terms of the data the biases that are replicated by the data. And this is something that a lot of technology lawyers and ethics people are looking at right now. So I won't pretend to be an expert on that, but we know it's an issue, right? And UKRI has been doing things like responsible innovation, trust and privacy, those kind of things. But again, money is the challenge here, right? The business models of AI, we think about the equivalent we have now, so social media, is not set up if there's no financial incentives for them to address these things. So we already we're going backwards on that. So like Twitter getting rid of all their AI ethics people, lower level of moderation. Obviously, current events also demonstrating the kind of polarization and exacerbation of biases that are exacerbated by these technologies. So that lack of alignment of the sort of micro level here, looking at what is actually happening within these companies, it's not lined up with the business models. So how do we actually address these harms? And that would be another obvious one for regulation. So you'd have to do things, force them to, and how you do that is another discussion, which is why we make the comment and then hand it over to policymakers. This needs fixing. Because the policy, we can identify the problem, but you have to get industry on board.
That's why practice is not straightforward.
Exactly. Well, that's the problem. And having looked at sort of debates like this in other areas, the copyright debates when Napster came along, for example, fun times. Yeah, it is really difficult to get everyone on because the incentives are so different. So there's two areas I think of regulation that we'll have to pay attention to. One is fixing that market failure that the business model and the sort of online harms and treatment of ED&I, all of those issues, trying to force them to align those two, and the other would be some competition. And then the other final thing I would add is that I was having this conversation or something similar to it, and I was thinking, actually, this is really cynical. Clearly, there is something nice to be said here, and that is that the role of of research in identifying these things, like that's what we're supposed to be doing. So as a group, we are supposed to be helping inform that. And so I think there are ways of doing this. So making sure that we are informing policy as much as we can is a way that the kind of academic research, the kind of co-creation type of research can help with my thoughts.
Thank you.
Me.
Yes, very.
Allow me, first of all, to say thank you for inviting me here. In my life, 15 years of my life with the center. The center is my heart from day one. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you, Elena. She's my mentor, my friend. She's always there for support. So let me go to the question. First of all, the first question, we are talking just AI, and I think we need to look at technology from a convergent point of view. These technologies that do not come on their own. they have the power, the benefit when they come together. So you do AI because you have other technologies to implement in order to have AI. So when you look at organization needs to be prepared to be able to embrace AI. And sometimes they are not, because their technology readiness is very poor. First policy implication for me is to promote the concept of convergence. It's not just that you have just one technology, it is done. It is not done at all. You need to have a backbone and architecture on which you develop AI. And many times, particularly small medium enterprise, this is not there. Therefore, you cannot really adopt the angle. So this is my first consideration. In a sense, I want not just AI, it's the convergence of AI, blockchain. You need 5G connectivity to have certain models and so on. So this is my the first point. Second point goes in discussion we had before, the demand. It is not acceptable anymore that we push technology down. And we carry on pushing technology down towards individuals, towards companies, towards cities, towards community, towards ecosystems, when these actors do not really have the skills for embracing those technologies. So in my opinion, from a policy perspective, the analysis of the demand and the impact on the demand is fundamental in order to then enable the companies to really adopt this technology and diffuse the benefit of these technologies towards their customer base or their citizens and towards their revenue share. So this is very important. I have daily experience on strategy developed around all the beautiful technology you want that will fail completely because you have not asked yourself, yes, but my customer will actually take that. Will actually engage with that type of technology I'm bringing in? And the answer is no. Because the answer is simply no, because you are not engaged with your customer, you have not understood your customer. You believe that he or she will adopt it. Blind eyes. The 5G, the blockchain, is an example that I think should be a sort of, the question mark every time you look at new technology. 2016, 17, you become rich with blockchain. I used to go to this conference on the panel at that. I was going to talk about the actual certain type of tech was all about crypto, all about becoming rich, all about showing the audience how to use Bitcoin on a crypto exchange was the death of the technology. So the demand, working on the demand from a policy point of view, from a practitioner point of view, is very important. This is one of the reasons why I'm doing teaching here. Because I realized that around the table, around me, many people who do not really understand what we are talking about. We're talking blockchain, AI, ML, Internet of Things. What are these things? So in the teaching I do, I explain to I'm expecting my students completely ignorant about these topics. And my expectation with myself is that at the end of the day, they come out of the class after 3 hours and are able to say, okay, Internet of Things does this and this, has this implication for the company, and has these challenges when I need to develop it. And that is the only exclusive reason why I'm doing the teaching. And I think, going to last question, the last panel, this is very important. Preparing people to technologies in a simple way, like talking to my mom who does not even use the mobile phone, is very important.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Just like quickly, I know that I'm not supposed to be involved in this.
One comment.
I feel that's quite relevant. From my experience in the industry, and we're talking about emerging technology, that's something that I've been involved for quite a lot now, and especially looking to AI and building on the points, definitely there is the element of demand. And this demand goes from external and internal the organizations, and I'm talking from the industry side. It doesn't go in a line for the user externally. The employees are asking the organizations to know or engage with that technology. Especially now when you look into ChatGPT, it's a great example. The way that this then becomes to get answered to be used and then how the policy for implementation, internal policy for implementation is also taking place is related to regulation. and then what the regulators are expecting for financial institutions, for example, to deal with the data or the responsibilities of that, but then also how they can use that. Yeah, the organization, very few large organizations will allow you to use the computer to access ChatGPT. So now they're pushing in parallel fast speed to develop their own ChatGPT versions with the policies implemented to be able to attend that demand. So that's me, quickly, just to add a little bit there.
Thank you. I thought this was a really interesting discussion unfolding, the way we moved from regulations and ethics over market power and then actually into the teaching the skills and capabilities towards the end, which I think actually nicely connects with the next question that's coming up, which in my mind when we posted wasn't that closely linked with one another. What I'm suggesting we do next is we move to the second question here and continue with the panel, and then have a discussion at the end where we open up the floor for questions, just because I think if I do it now, I lose, it falls to pieces time management-wise. So the next question that we put to the panelists is, how can innovation policies and practices be made more inclusive so that benefits are shared equitably among a diverse population? And maybe I'd like to start with Jacqueline to my left.
I'd like to echo my thanks for sharing this collaboration with me today. And also, that unlike most people when they come across a D&I person, Helen didn't walk the other way and collaborated. So my answer to this question sits, I think, in my rather unique experience of being a practitioner, an academic, and also being in that policy field, parliamentarian. What I'm going to share with you is what I think works. First and foremost, and we've heard it a lot today, co-design. The anecdotal, emerging, and advanced evidence shows us time and time again a direct correlation between this and successful outcomes. Particularly with the D&I industry, you do not work with the people who face the barriers and cannot achieve the change you want to achieve. The removal of conflict between the intent and the administration, any policies, practices, and interventions that are put into place. I'm going to give an example. I'm going to go back to AI. So, we in the UK have one of the most envied programmes that supports people who want to create enterprise who would have the badge disabled. It has a substantial amount of funding behind it, £66,000 per person to innovate and create enterprise. Put the support in place they need to do it. However, as we see AI going forward, we start to see how we really need to have ethics. Because somewhere behind this, we would like to see AI establishing the innovation that's created, the impact beyond the individual entrepreneur. What we sometimes start to see is, how can we save money and reduce support using AI? I think that's a really important thing when we're thinking about it. There are supportive pathways throughout the process. Generally, in any new field, when you're looking to become the equitable side of things, people don't move. They need a supportive pathway to take them through that process. There's holistic and sustainable ethical collaboration. And again, I feel very privileged to be involved in the work that Helen in this centre does. Because what I have seen here, and I feel it extremely strongly, not only commitment to inclusion, but ethical collaboration. And that's what's led to some of the really unique work that we're taking forward.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. Saverio?
Yeah, please. Okay, I said demand. I think another issue wants to touch on this is also explain technology to the user in order to eliminate misunderstanding that are created. I'm thinking about the future of work, all the debate about the future of work, and if we go back to AI and all these scary messages that are sent around you will lose your job because of ChatGPT, you will lose your job because of generative AI, and you will probably, there will probably be a reorganization of the labor force, of workforce around these technologies. But I think it needs to be explained. The communication of technologies needs to become much more empathic, first of all, and much more clear. So for example, in my region where I come from, there is an automotive company. It employs 12,000 people. This organization will go on automation. As already said, for 2 years, firing 4,000 employees, which means in southern Italy a disaster. Now, the policymakers are dealing with this type of approach in a very negative way, in a sense that they create the fear towards strata of population that also are, they touch completely what all this debate about AI, about technology. So I think, and again, in my course, I have last lesson in which I invite someone who communicates technologies to tell the students how you talk about tech, how you talk about the benefits of tech, how you talk about the challenges of tech, and how you deliver this message in order to basically not create a state of fear, but maybe transform that in a state of excitement, because AI is an opportunity too. It's not just a fear. So that is something that I wanted to stress on the diverse population. And then the other point is about data policy. At the end of the day here, we are talking about data. Whichever technology we talk about is about data. And what do we do with this data? Now, you take example on taxation. The case of the Netherlands and New Zealand, when the tax system was based on an ML model, asking money to people who basically could not afford to pay anything. And then because this was not verifying the system, there were people evicted by their home, all because of an ML model. Yeah. So I think a reflection on how you use AI, ML towards social groups is another massive item for policymakers. So,
it actually goes to the point, regulating this thing is just not, I mean, you
it's
can
not
ask
easy.
for it as many times as you want, but regulating this stuff is not going to be, anyway, I don't want to interrupt, but
No.
that's absolutely fine that, everybody says, we should check this. Checking this is very complicated.
You happy to speak next?
Yes, I'm very happy to speak. So how can innovation policies be made more inclusive is the question. And so the way that I'm going about this is through the angle of entrepreneurship, because that's where I come from, Entrepreneurship Policy Unit at OECD. And then the argument, of course, is that entrepreneurship is a component of innovation policy. And it's that component which channels innovation into the market through new business creation. And then I think the point to make is that entrepreneurship policy is quite recent. We've heard about this. It's now recognized in government that there's a need for what we call inclusive entrepreneurship policy. And I think that we at the OECD, with the Commission, European Commission that we've been working with for years, have actually been instrumental in getting this terminology, inclusive entrepreneurship, into the world of policy. To demonstrate that, I would just say, okay, our own products, but the ministerial meeting on SMEs and entrepreneurship in June this year has got in the declaration a commitment by the governments of the OECD to make entrepreneurship more diverse. And the OECD recommendation on SME and entrepreneurship policy issued by the Council in June 2022 has got a recommendation again, that governments will promote inclusion in entrepreneurship. So the state of play, actually, we have a publication every 2 years called The Missing Entrepreneurs. Next one's in November 2023. The missing entrepreneurs, they number 35 million. That's what we estimate. We say there are 35 million in the OECD area missing entrepreneurs. And that represents about 1/3 of the total number of entrepreneurs that are there actually today in the OECD countries. They're based on what would be the number if people created from their social group at the same rate as the male in the middle-aged group. You know, if you leveled up, that's what you would get. 2/3, no, 3/4 are women. 3/4 of the missing entrepreneurs are women. And then youth and seniors are other important groups. So we have entrepreneurship policy, and entrepreneurship policy has to fill the market failures and the gaps that are preventing people from being able to create businesses. We know where the market failures are, just about. The question that arises that we don't know the answer to is the extent to which the entrepreneurship policies are open to the people from the underrepresented groups. We have some indications that maybe entrepreneurship policy is not fully open to people from the missing entrepreneurs groups. Ireland, if you take the Women in Business 2020 action plan, they have targets to increase the share of women-owned high potential startups on their programs to 1/3, and to increase the participants of women in startup programs by 50% by 2025. It does imply that the actual numbers are lower. Another thing that was a debate that we got into strongly was COVID-19 and the business support measures to help people to survive COVID-19. And it was argued in our work that women fell through the cracks of that support because of the structure of their business, the particular business form, because of the lack of being able to meet the payroll threshold, the turnover threshold required, or the lack of use of bank loans when the pay loan protection, program was working through loans. So poor design of programs. It's to do with a one-size-fits-all product mentality. It's to do with a failure to communicate the programs to your target audience. It's to do with a lack of diversity in your agency staff. And take business incubation. It suffers a lot from low participation from women entrepreneurs. Due to what? Well, poor recruitment onto the incubators. Why? Because of male-dominated incubator managers and networks and selection panels, and also insensitive design of the programs themselves. For example, a requirement for all the entrepreneurs to be resident in the incubator might be more difficult for women. Evening meetings, which might be more difficult for women. Lack of women mentors, which then gives off the impression that this is not a women-friendly environment. So just to finish, how can you make entrepreneurship policy more inclusive? 2 points. One, creating dedicated initiatives, schemes for people from different groups, like immigrants, like youth business plan competitions, like women incubators. But that's perhaps not the major thing. The major thing is perhaps making the existing mainstream entrepreneurship programs more accessible to people from the different target groups. And that means setting targets, quotas, altering the program designs, thinking carefully about that, and marketing appropriately.
Thank you, John. Very insightful. It links in well with what you said, Jacqueline, doesn't it, when you talked about the conflict between the intent and the practice. Some of the missing things. Felipe, please.
Amazing point. And then actually what I want to share, I think connects a lot with what was said. Again, from the industry perspective, and then I'm going back a little bit and I'm going to talk about the reality here in the UK and then within a financial institution is where I work now, but in Saudi Arabia, where I worked for 3 years in an oil and gas company in Aramco, as head of innovation program. And then it's about bringing into entrepreneurship and innovation the excluded in a way. So when I joined it's a story in a way, but when I joined the company, I was with this remit. So how can we approach internally and externally entrepreneurship and innovation as a kind of a legacy? So it was looking into how to excite employees to become entrepreneurs and then to bring in the ideas forward and then actually balance how much the company is buying to how much the company is creating, producing internally. So that was one of the demands. The other demand is the one that I'm more excited was looking for the country and was what can we do to Saudi society in a way that we give the tools and instruments for them to become entrepreneurs or become creatives from the basic idea. So from that, we create a program called Creative Solutions. And that was an amazing tool to bring people and then inclusivity into entrepreneurship innovation. So the basic idea was to be able to create a program that takes people from idea to a prototype with phases. So we could classify as a pre-incubation, incubation. We have several names nowadays. But the idea was open. Anyone that was a Saudi resident or was a Saudi citizen was eligible to apply. Was about emerging technologies. They would need to work with emerging technologies, but they didn't need to know emerging technology. They just need to have ideas, any idea. So the whole selection process was based into what do you want to do with emerging technologies? And then the first cut was looking to AR, XR, AR, VR, and then mixed reality as a layer that they could play because we want to see more digital content creation happening also in the region. And then I'm going to jump to the numbers because that was very satisfying to see, and then it was quite impressive as well because I run the program for 3 years. The program is still there and still running. The first surprise for me was the number of people that hedged their interest in the program. It was close to 3,000 people in Saudi Arabia, all across the region, applying for the program. From that, we don't select the 300 ideas, and that was the more hard part because then we start to really need to decide how we would be the initial cohort. You know, it couldn't be for everyone. It needs to be a group of 30 ideas. So I chose, we contracted a selection panel. We try to be very diverse, people from everywhere in the world that will help us to select these. Through the application form, I didn't want to bias. So I took the regions, I took the male, female, I took the names of it, because I wanted to see the demographics that was coming, because it was very new. Nobody was really getting this kind of data there. And then came the first big surprise that the vast majority were female, the applicants, like 90% of the ideas were female. And then when it comes to the selected 30 ideas, again, led by 85% was ideas led by females into the program. So we ended up selecting for the first cohort, 30 ideas was 58 people engaged, and then we start to run all the positive elements that consider the region, okay, and then how much we get and understand about Middle East, or we understand the changes that's going on in Saudi and the openness and everything else. Not saying that everything is positive, far away from this, but this was a very positive aspect because even the quality of the prototype that they end up developing was incredible. They ended up touring, some of these ideas got awards, they went to Venice in festival, if lots of creative spaces. And then also other part that was quite important is inclusion was to make international. So everyone, lots of the stakeholders that we engaged was representing Canada, Brazil, lots of UK stakeholders engaged with us, delivering master classes, understanding what was going on there. That was also initially a worry that they would just reflect ideas that they were copying from external. So the narratives wouldn't be about their narratives, but was about their narrative. The whole huge majority was about their narratives. And this ended up influencing a lot what was going on inside the organization. Some of the people end up being employed, but they learn about how to code using game engines because we kind of support. They pivot their dreams or their ideas. They create businesses. So I think just to wrap it up, I think the core elements, and then I still trying to understand why it still is so powerful and successful there. And then I think one element is kind of maturity, in a way, of the ecosystem around entrepreneurship and innovation that give a huge opportunity. Because there was less bias and less cuts in terms of who would come and what was our expectation in this. And that was reflecting this push that became a kind of a catching phrase for us internally, that is, these two programs, the internal and the external ones, was about supporting a culture of innovation. How can we entrepreneurship innovation culture that goes beyond these walls of Aramco, but empowers other people to have dreams and so on. And the core benefit also doesn't not related directly to the core business there, but potentially to what could be the future of a country in transformation. But yeah.
Thank you very much for all four speakers on this topic. I would really like to stay on this much longer. We have such a rich and the different angles that you've brought to this. I think it's been really invigorating, and to continue with this. But we have such a broad spectrum here, and we've also invited speakers to talk about a variety of other issues. And the next one was around how can innovation in the digital space be balanced with concerns about data privacy and security. So maybe ethics we've heard a lot of, maybe that feeds into this question as this Saverio.
Okay, there is this security by design framework, which is becoming slowly adopted. And I think UK has a very nice regulatory landscape. It's one of the first countries with their connected device regulation environment. So that needs to be promoted more. I would say that the next step now is all this debate about twin transition. Maybe it's more European Commission term rather than UK term, in which basically the question is which is the role of digital technologies for green. So at there is, yes, digital technology are for green, but we should not forget that digital technologies also have some green problems too. So when we develop code in ML, in AI, for example, we consume energy from the data set, to give an example, or the case of blockchain again. So there is this idea of the green digital transformation. So how to promote digital transformation that basically reduce any form of climate impact. This is another aspect. The other point I would say is that this stuff needs to be interoperable. So technology needs to work together well in order to produce the effect they need to do. That requires standardization. So standardization is very important. My last point is that regulation is very important, but I'm increasingly have the conviction that if it's national, why it doesn't work. It needs to be international, needs to be across countries. If we look at the data, for example, our data sovereignty, what do you do about data when it's in the cloud? So my data is not in the UK now, it's in Sweden. What do we do with that? So all that require really an international effort in regulating these technologies. Let's stop here. Sorry. Space for others.
Thank you, Saverio. Yes, so the issue of regulation and potentially the role of industry standards or private standards?
Just another point. Each company needs to have an ethicist of data, in my opinion.
Pardon? Each company?
Each company needs to have an ethicist for data, which now they call ethics of AI, but
Yes.
it's about ethics of what you do with my data. Each company needs to have one.
Yes.
Awesome.
I'm taking notes.
Maybe I move on to the next question, which is about the international frameworks and agreements, and maybe that can link in with the regulations and the standards that you touched on, Asa. Although that we need or are needed to govern global innovation in areas with global implications, such as climate change.
Yeah, such as climate change, and you know, quite rightly, Saverio pointed out that there's not enough discussion about the negative impacts of all these servers. I think the first thing I wanted to say was you can't innovate your way out of climate change. So I think we know that. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that could start to address these things of existing innovation. So the obvious thing that comes to me, and it touches again on that, because a lot of data servers are being put in countries where it's colder. We have a tendency where they're not polluter pays policies. Say that 5 times fast. And so we have a lot of exporting of, particularly in Western wealthy countries, exporting of waste. And I think the term is waste colonialism. I mean, that's what it is. So we have several industries, fashion being is a particularly bad example, where waste is exported. Recycling does this too. So we have, I think that's a very obvious one of fairly low-hanging fruit of coming up with a system that means if you are producing a product, you are also responsible for the recycling of it, and that should apply to all new technologies too, because a lot of these, some of the minerals, I don't know the technology on those sides, but we know there's a lot of waste things that come out of technology innovation. And so I think that needs to be built in, but it's not specific to new innovation. I think that's the general comment. I'm actually going to say a slightly anti-regulation comment. And this is kind of goes to the demand side that you were talking about too, which is absolutely something that needs to be paid attention to. But I was having a conversation recently about insect protein, which is apparently it's a big thing in some countries, and it's less of a thing in this country. It is a huge thing in agriculture. So in terms of feed, right? Feed. Well, the problem is actually getting insect protein into the human food chain, or food chain, the human food supply, which is a better way of putting it, is full of regulation. I mean, to be fair, they're being, the waste side of it is pretty impressive because they're being fed on waste products. So there's an opportunity potentially that looking at some of the regulations there could pave the way for making that happen. That said, those regulations are there to begin with. So there are areas of emerging technology where we could, moving, from example, from an agricultural application to a human application where we could have some sort of, there are opportunities here. We'll see if we get there. And I'm going to be slightly indulgent and say one thing. So my sister, which kind of goes back to the previous panel. So my sister's an ecologist. And 15 years ago, when we were doing our PhDs, I said to her, the success of what, is it 15? The success of what you study and the success of what I study are inversely related. And I don't think that's the case anymore and I don't know if that's the case of what happens in practice or how we study it, but we would not have had, I knew people working on this, but we would not have had this innovation and sustainability discussion 15, 20 years ago. So I'm pleased that we've got that.
Thank you. Very insightful. Yes, and of course, sometimes standards and regulation can hinder, cutting edge innovation because of, like the feed issue that you said, inspection animal feed. Because the standard is based on something which is slightly more established than something that is very new, and if it then doesn't fit that framework, that now, what role do universities play, but also all other forms of training, vocational training, in supporting innovation and maybe in overcoming some of the issues that you've raised on the panel. And I think this is a question that Jacqueline picked.
Again, I come from the same point when I'm talking to this, and also I'm also coming from the point that I learned very early on in my career. I wanted to reduce inequality. I need to influence government policy, and I needed to have academic validation. So I think universities and vocational training play a pivotal role. Particularly universities, they are established, and to a degree they transcend the comings and goings of political ideologies. Maybe less so in terms of funding streams nowadays, but certainly less likely to disappear because of funding streams right now. They're crucial in providing established learning environments, providing safe spaces within which innovation can thrive. So in terms of the particular piece of work I'm centering on at the moment, so my work is across all of the aspects of inequalities. At the moment, looking at disability and entrepreneurship and inclusive entrepreneurship. I want to give you, I'll put this into context. So, when working with universities, I these safe spaces where those who face barriers to innovation can actually be embraced and can add value. Providing innovation hubs, accelerator programs that maybe didn't start off as inclusive, but certainly have grown that way. Thinking with schools and colleges, innovation and enterprise summer schools, we think again in terms of disability and our young people who very early on in life are often given career options where their choices are stunted. Universities can provide that bridge and put in place and work on curriculum that puts forward an alternative. And that alternative not only gives that choice, it changes the socioeconomic outcomes for these young people. Essential academic research and validation to influence change, however differently that might be done nowadays. So, and for me, the most important thing in there, and we've talked about this a couple of times today, conduit and ethical collaboration between policy, practice, and academia. I would add a caveat that it has to be ethical collaboration. When we do bring these institutions together, and particularly when you bring practitioners and entrepreneurs into this space, it's important to protect everybody in that relationship.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Maybe on the question of the role of university training that we picked up, I wondered if any of the other speakers felt that wanted to add, because I guess Saverio quite strongly you raised the issue around skills and capabilities.
I'm working on I'm advisor on the Northern Irish city of Derry, London Derry, and in which they have two issues. One issue is a skilled workforce on certain sector like constructions, and then you have very high skilled workforce that live there without the brain drain. And what they are doing, what we design together is these upskilling, reskilling type of programs that touch both sides. So on one side, you have a very basic vocational training to raise the level of digitalization of a class of workers. And on the other side, you try to hold experts in the existing IT companies in Delhi through upskilling in AI, in order to kind of create a message there that you can be an AI scientist also in Delhi. You don't need to go to Dublin or London for doing that. You can be cool. And this is done in collaboration between the town hall the university there, and further educational college, which I believe, what I understood so far, they have a quite good, very highly expert training staff in that. So I think, again, for the future of work and to defeat the fear of AI, upskilling and reskilling are important things. I mean, the EU is doing the Pact of Skill, which is all about that. It's all about reskilling people on new technology.
Just quickly, sorry.
I was going to invite you to stay as well, because to me it's then reaching onto the actual work that comes. Go ahead, Felipe.
Just a quick one. I think there is an element of the role of the organization, the private organization, the large organizations, on upskilling as well, or co-creation and collaboration with academic institutions, as we normally see, but also with initiatives that can be done in isolation, as the example that I presented. But not saying that don't happens sometimes from all the intermediaries into this upskilling of this stuff, but I think there's still space there. I think one key element that keeps reverberating in my mind is this idea that social corporate responsibility can go into entrepreneurship innovation, can go into other sectors that not just into, and then in fact, environment, sustainability, and everything else, because you create this base that was discussed in the previous panel as well. And that's the role, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, I'm glad you said, if I can say something, I was going to say from the point of view of practitioners, going back to your point about demand. So this all, again, a lot of people I get, that start working on, they all want to do data science. Like, listen, you're a policy advisor. I understand data is very interesting and all that, but not everyone can do data science anymore. And so I don't have an answer. For once, I don't have an answer to this. But I do think finding a balance between pushing out these skills because some sectors say we need them, and then creating the expectation they will be used across the border indiscriminately is a little bit, I don't think universities can resolve this, but they have a role of saying we need to equip people for doing a lot of things, but understanding they won't be able to always all do the same thing. So I had a curiosity because I get sometimes this imbalance between the person wanting to do what they learned at university, but having applied and got a job where this is important but not the key thing. And so not everyone can be a data science in government. What can I say? I'd love to provide different role for that.
I could just pick on that bit. It's really important. So I work in sectors where people don't have those opportunities and are often thought of that they couldn't have concept of innovation and effectively barred from doing so. But I also think that when we started societies that perhaps purely skill to what is perceived to be needed, I think that universities have a very valuable role of actually reminding people that actually that if we do that, then we actually take away that innovation of actually imagining the unimaginable of what we might need future world. So we don't just skill for the skills somebody thinks we need, but skills for the thinking, etc.
And I think I'm going to take 2 questions from the audience, 2 or 3. And I hope that Rosa and Jonathan will forgive me. I think I might not go into the issue of metrics and method. I think maybe it just takes us onto a different journey, and with time has been almost up. So do we have 5 minutes, Alan?
Yes, but we can continue the discussion because Roy is going to be chairing, and that's an opportunity for other people to speak in that one session.
Okay, shall we take the questions then in that session?
I think that might be the way of doing it, if that's okay, because Zoe will be orchestrating Martin and Matthew as well. Thank you. You've got a chance to speak. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we're bringing So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
And all our next
Oh, thank you.
Miss Maya.
No.
That's for you, that's for you. So who's missing?
Yeah. Okay. I think we can take a little bit of a stretch and then. So thank you so much, Marion, for sharing the session, and to Brett, who is not here at the moment. And I hope that we've all been stirred up. We came here with maybe ideas of what the session might be or might not be, but I hope we've all been challenged. I certainly have been challenged. And we're going to wrap up this session by hearing from you, because we've heard from the fantastic panels that we've had. We've also heard some questions that have made us think, and we want to turn it back to you. And I wondered how to do this. You know, I'm sure we can be here for another hour discussing some of the points that we have raised. And some of the things that we heard so strongly spoken by the first panel was the issue of collaboration, or in fancy academic terms, co-creation or co-design, working together. One of the things that also came through was making the students, putting the students as the core or the agents of that future in some way. Because Saverio said something, he said, not everybody will go and work, the clever ones or the people that are that are championing some of these technologies will go to Google and Amazon, but not all our students will go there. But the students that decide to stay in other organizations, do we have a responsibility to support them onwards to see how they can also take these technologies to their own context and strengthen the context and maybe make it a little bit more popular? Do we have that power as academics, since they all pass through us at some point in time? So those are some of the thirds. But let's sum it up in this way. What is the gap? So imagine, I was here 5 years ago. That was my first CIMR meeting, or first CIMR event. Thanks to Helen for posting that thing on our MSC chat on that day, and I came. And most of us are going to be here in 5 years' time, holding on to some of our students. It's interesting that I was speaking with my colleague who has just completed a master's, something to do with Phil. And I'm sure that some of us will come with students next time as well. And I just want us to imagine, what do we want the topic or the narrative to be in 5 years' time? Okay, not too far to think. And maybe think about it in terms of the word gap. And not the gap as in find the gap in the train station, or the fancy gap that we use in management speak. But let's think about this in terms of what gains do we need to make? What are the things that we need to avoid? Rosa pointed out that it's not always positive. Sometimes we need to eliminate the negatives as well. And should we say people, who do we need to partner with? What sort of collaborations do we need to enter into? Do we need to then work more and put, more stakeholders in the center of our proposals even before we begin to research? I mean, what good is it to do all the work for 5 years and then you find out that nobody can use it? I'm sure we don't do that anyway. But let's think about it in terms of what are the gaps and what we have heard today, and moving forward in hearing from you, what are the gains that we need to make? What are the things that we have learned and we need to avoid? And how do we need to partner to ensure that when we come in 5 years' time, we have a strong narrative to go with? Who's going to open the floor? So who is the bold one? Thank you so much, Patrick.
I'd like to thank everyone for their contributions. It has raised a lot of issues. The gap, I personally think, is understanding of what the words are. And when you talk about co-creation, if I may, I'd like to use an example. I invited Mutu to join me to talk to consultants working for the then CBI. And actually, the whole emphasis of what they were feeding to government was about co-creation and innovation. And they had no understanding of the depth of research and understanding that was going on here and at other universities. And they were just working and writing as though it was sort of, well, to me, it felt like, well, we'll take this phrase and we'll put it in. and it would be government speak, motherhood, apple pie sort of thing. There's no understanding of the reality of the world. So I think the gap is vocabulary, and the aspiration is in 5 years or sooner to have a common understanding of something.
Okay, so is this something that we're going to avoid, speaking in some academic speak that is not well communicated, or is that what you're saying?
Well, I think it is more education to people who are advising, say, governments, in order to get policy right for the reality on the ground, which I think is what researchers are finding out about and feeding to government, but government is not understanding. But I think if they are educated better in the towns with the understanding of those words, that might help.
Thank you so much. And please, panelists or anybody, feel free to comment and just let me know if you want any of. Yes.
It's a great point, and then I come from where I come, and then I see these different understanding of different concepts, and then if we want to talk about cooperation, from the cooperation part of it means something, and then also to the point that there is cycles of these concepts that comes back and then becomes more fashionable again, and then this also creates a bit of this dissonance. The other element is just a comment actually on top of your question, but it's about how much then the industry sometimes also create this concept, and then as an academia we run together. You know, I've been seeing now this transformation, and everybody's talking about venture building. And then if you go to the core of venture building, we're talking about incubation, entrepreneurship. We're talking about things that we are talking and researching and discussing for decades. But then now the innovation agencies want to sell to the corporations or for the government that the future is venture building. But these already exist. But then becomes a new area that we need to align the understanding, and becomes, oh, this is new, this is innovative, so we need to do venture building. But sometimes the organization already is doing, but not putting under that new concept that is just tweaked a little bit, just to be fancy and show that it's doing something new. Yeah, sorry, but I do agree.
Thanks a lot, Felipe. And I think Martin mentioned that, talking about old wine in new wine skins, or have I mixed it up?
Old wine in new bottles, pretty much what you said. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what is our responsibility? Because I think I know a little bit about wine, and I know that you can do that and damage the wine skins that we're talking about. So what is our responsibility in ensuring that when this old wine resurfaces, that we make sure that it is well communicated, and we make sure that it does not destroy what already exists, but rather builds on it. So I wonder if anybody wants to comment on that and share how that might play out. Should I begin to pick on people? Hello.
I'm struggling with a number of things because I wanted to go beyond the CBI point as such, because again, my background was in the metrics and so forth. I majored in data. I used to work for funding councils, so I ran data and funding and so forth. And part of the question I was going to ask is potentially say, when we began collecting data as such, it took some time to get everyone to understand what we were after, and it was a lot of effort. The administrative burden on institutions to collect a decent data set that we could then go on to use to influence government and to do funding, that was a massive amount of work. So partly I was going to say, if we had a last question, I'd have said, what are the right things within reasonable burden? But in 5 years' time, how close can I get to getting some of that data from business? Because all I get from the CBI is anecdotes, and it frustrates me as such. So what I would like to know is, within that period, what could we do to encourage businesses to actually share a little bit more of the baseline data to prove exactly how they are so good at this innovation stuff and how they're quite so efficient? Because otherwise, that's kind of frustrating. Similarly, the point being that within collaborative research and contract research, CBI are very, very fond of collaborative research. That's the most important thing. And so we did drill into that a bit more. We found out that, that's basically because when you talk about collaborative research, it's generally about a 9-to-1 public weighting of that funding. You put in £1, public puts in £9, and guess what? That's really popular with businesses. But when it comes down to actually making businesses pay, it's not we pay our taxes, we should have this free. That's not how it works. But there is still that frustration, if you like, particularly if you imagine a table with and civil servants on one side, business people on the other side. Civil servants in theory are reasonable. are objective. Business people are persuasive. They tend to carry those arguments. So how can, in 5 years' time, I get some decent data which actually will enable me to have a slightly more objective conversation when it comes down to how innovation really works in the private sector? That didn't answer your questions.
I knew you were trying to communicate something to me like, call me. Thank you so much, Adrian, for that point, because I think, yeah, maybe we can turn that question, and I'm going to come to you, Rosa, in a minute, but if we can turn that question on its head and say that, how can we make ourselves more desirable to businesses, such that that data will come? There's the two words that always come to mind when relating with customers, the stakeholders, it's attack or attract. Most times we seem to be doing the attack, right? We seem to just be going for it. But we can make ourselves and position ourselves as more attractive so that it naturally comes to us. And then we get what we want, and then we're able to also support them better. And I don't know whether Rosa wants to add to that, or just completely disagree.
It is partially related, I think. Again, maybe not exactly the question you had asked me for, Adrian, gave us download, but me was more like this. So better collaboration comes from shared objectives, also shared language. By the way, I agree with you. I think this language and the whole common drive, maybe academics have noticed it. We notice like every now and then my colleagues come up with a new name for something that is at least 50 years old. Like why are we calling this now? Oh, because it's better. The same as before. Anyway, so communication an issue, but for me, shared objectives is something that would nurture more of this collaboration, cooperation, or whatever. And they're not always the same. We continue talking about examples where things have worked, as I said before, and I have enough examples where things have not worked, and as I was told by panelists before. So shared objectives, shared timetables.
I like that, shared objectives, and that's just a new phrase again. But thank you. No, Rosa, I just have to say that. But thank you so much, because I mean, the more we work with them and the more we just try to be more inclusive in what we do, then what should be will naturally happen, right?
Yes, I mean, like sometimes in academia, it's more about understanding, the process. For a policy, an industry might be different. Felipe, the policy that is justifying this particular action, not always the same. So understanding the process and justifying the action, maybe understanding the process leads to a different action. And what you do then, that's the thing. That's what I mean by, in the end, it's understanding that what do you want the research before, and then be prepared for the research to have an answer that's not the answer that you expect, or start the research without expecting an answer. In policy, they always expect a particular answer. That's
Thank you, Rosa. Yes.
Maybe the ESG framework seems to be a particularly effective way of getting finance and big business, a much broader audience, interested in proactively coming up with policy suggestions, because a lot of big business through big finance wants to build sustainable brands and look good to their counterparties so that they can potentially be helped or bailed out later in policy interventions. So it's existentially important in the developed world to build your ESG profile. And that means a lot of companies, especially big finance, want to push ESG proactively into policy suggestions even before the regulators came up with them. So that's quite a helpful kind of model to get it coming from them instead of pushed from some bureaucrats who don't quite know what's going on. But there is also the problem that there's quite a lot of not just greenwashing, but a kind of superficial, simple thinking in ESG. It's basically started, you could argue, as mainly a marketing tool from funds a decade or two ago to reduce the gradual move of mass assets into passive vehicles. So ESG became the manual filter that fund industry could use. So they're really the guys who invented it. It's a brilliant framework. It's very shallow. Particularly, there's a lot of international arbitrage. That every big company, especially big finance, is very good at international regulatory and tax arbitrage. So of course, as they mentioned, there's this kind of waste colonialism. There's all sorts of kicking the can, not just down the road, but on the other, into the future, but to the other side of the world where you don't know, you can't see it anymore. So the environmental, social governance issues that you were so worried about are not on your balance sheet anymore, but they're at another side of the world that's probably autocratic and probably much less transparent and probably actually even worse things happening. But it's none of your business anymore. So there is a lot of problems, even though it's a wonderful framework.
Thank you for bringing that. I didn't catch your name. Mike. Okay. So thank you so much, Mike, for that. Does anybody want to comment to the Yes, Rosa.
Yeah, I think what we are seeing right now, based on what you said, as well as what Rosa said, as well as what Catherine said, thinking about this co-creation or collaboration and shared objectives, shared understanding, it is also to look into the objectives of the partners and coming up with a model where it is win-win to partners who are involved in it. So for instance, if our objectives is for data sharing, so then how can we come up with a model so those who share the data would be able to achieve certain objectives through that sharing? So I think that's where we could really see in the co-creation literature where they have highlighted different examples of different models, and then for us to think about what would work better for us, and then bring the partners together with shared objectives or to develop shared understanding and think about the model more innovatively and make sure that these models evolve over time as well, because one model will not be applicable as the partners are evolving, as the outcome of the co-creation is evolving. So to be mindful of and to have these agile practices, have relational management capabilities, because all these things are important when it comes to achieving. Yes, also be very mindful of what doesn't work well, and to look into how to overcome these potential mistakes. Yeah, so my main point is to think about win-win situations and to be very creative in that regard. So, yeah.
Thank you. And I'm taking agility from there as well, where we need to know that it's not going to remain the same. Exactly. What works today needs to be fine-tuned a little bit next time to in different contexts and in different situations. You have your hand up.
Yeah, just to add to the point of knowledge sharing and kind of building out of communication. There might be an element of moving brains between sectors and kind of, like academics moving into businesses or into government, kind of building up careers that are kind of flexible and more diverse. That element of flexibility will increase shared knowledge, will increase better understanding between partners, and will generate innovations and collaborations in a better way. And I see that because if you think about your career, probably 30% around people here will live up to 90 years old. So what will be your career in those 90 years of life? Just to give you kind of that means you have to transition between sectors, you have to collaborate and kind of building up those diverse careers. And just to kind of give you, I like data and kind of bringing up, and it's only 8% of researchers in the UK move between sectors. Only 8%. That's very little if you compare to other countries in Europe. So there is kind of like there's a space for us to build up diverse career elements between students or even in the research community as well.
Thank you. And your name?
Jorge.
Yes. I'll go to Harry.
I'm a bit concerned here as an innovation scholar, because what I hear is that we have to be scientific consultants. And I'm not happy with that message, because that's not our field. That's not the history of our field. That's not where we started. That's not what Chris Freeman, and he mentioned, his name should have been mentioned. That's not what Nathan Rosenberg, that's not what Carlota Perez. That's not all these, our fathers in this field, intellectual fathers and mothers. That's not what was meant to be in this field. This field was meant to be on the one hand critical, and on the other hand constructive. So we see what is wrong in the current world, and then we provide solutions. So in that field, we always criticize neoclassical economics. So that was a starting point. Mainstream economic policies too. So we do have a heterodox tradition, and I feel like we're losing this. I feel like we're becoming colonized by methods from the econometrics and this methodological empiricism of mainstream economics and hypothesis testing. And then we talk about co-creation, where all these methods that you publish now in 4-star journals don't allow you to do any co-creation. Not even to do policy evaluation, deductively. It's about constant empirical observation. Innovation policy is about change. How can you use that method to make sure that the policy works? Like we have all these ironies, all these philosophical contradictions, methodological contradictions. And that's actually what we need to be talking about. How we're going to keep our character, our DNA, our intellectual DNA intact, because that's what made us successful. We're not in a disciplinary field, we are a post-disciplinary field. We started out about disciplines and we created a new discipline. So, all these things need to be mentioned because I hear things that, it's not what I know the field or it's not how the center used to be 15 years ago when I was a master's student and I joined it. So I think that's what we need to talk here. So what about our future at the center and whether we have that message, that spirit that made the field so successful? If it wasn't those fathers and mothers of our field talking and being brave enough, we wouldn't be here even having a center. So I think we need to keep that message there. So because we as young scholars, we forget that. It's all about getting a job, but there's something more important here. It's all about an intellectual tradition that needs to remain alive. It's important for our society. It's important for policy. It's very important for everyone. So, and I think I want to make that clear because that's my voice. Maybe others disagree with me.
No,
that's fine.
This session is to hear your voice. And I like that as you articulated your point, we say having hands go up. So we go to you straight, Martin. Because I'm not going to attempt to answer that.
I think it's really good. I'm conscious of time, so I'll be short. So we started out the conversation celebrating sustainability, diversity, and I think diversity of approaches is also quite important. I was actually surprised the number in the UK is 8% in terms of boundary crossing academics. I find this is incredibly high. Academia and maybe industry is often about specialization, right? Do what you do best and you will succeed. In academia, this meant for a long time coming up with new thoughts, defending them, making them a paradigm, and challenging conventional wisdom. And I think there must be room for that also in the future. I think there's also a need for people who are capable of interpreting, of translating. So I think we need to have the people who engage with what has academic research, what has made academic research great, has asked all the challenging and provocative questions. But we also need people who are boundary spanners, who can explain to policymakers why it's worthwhile having a thought or two about this new development. And I think we need a little bit of what both of you suggested. And that brings us back to the very first question in the session, the language, right? I'm surprised that we actually accepted that all of us now speak the same language. I experienced 20 years, 15 years ago, that academics and people from the other side, from outside the institution, spoke very different languages. And we couldn't always make sense. I think we made some progress. 5 years from now, I would hope that the students will say, well, I want to become a boundary spanner. No, the other one might want to follow in the righteous heterodox way. And I think this is what academia should be about, what the center might want to be about. I'll shut up now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I can see loads of hands going up, but I'm very, very mindful of time. But the great thing is that we have 2 hours to network, and I expect to see you talk to Martin very, very quickly. And I'm going to call up Professor Lawton Smith to come and give the last words, and maybe start there, and perhaps maybe 5 years' time, when we gather for the 20th anniversary, we might have you on the panel and you can give us your views on how things have gone. Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you.
This has been absolutely brilliant. So thank you, Marianne, and thank you, Gabby. I've got something for Gabby now. But this panel has been absolutely wonderful, and thank you very much for participation. I don't think anybody's left, which is absolutely fantastic. Most of it. It's not like my teaching when often go. But would like to thank Gabby.
Yes, special thank you to Gabby.
Can we take the video?
Yeah, I actually.
So thank you. Absolutely amazing. So I've got the bag to put those in. So that's really good.
Always the one taking the foot first.
Marion?
Okay, let's start again.
Thank you very much. And I didn't thank the people online, so I don't know whether there's still anybody there online, but thank you for those people too.
And I'm not sure whether this is planned, but shall we say that, shall we give a big round of applause to Helen? She has